Welcome to the Ask in Faith podcast, where we seek Christ-centered answers to life's difficult questions. My name is Justin Bates, and I will be your host. Let's take a look at this week's question. How do I sustain my faith when I'm feeling lost? How do I sustain my faith when I'm feeling lost? I love this question because it really gets to the heart of something we all face as disciples of Jesus Christ. We all have hard things that come our way that may knock us down a peg or make us second guess things that we thought we knew. And that happens. That's part of mortality. That's part of being a disciple of Jesus Christ. And so it's important that we know how to continue to sustain and exercise faith in the midst of maybe some uncertainty or some feeling of a loss of testimony or a loss of faith. And so I'm going to give you 3 suggestions that have been helpful for me and I think could be helpful for you as well. Number 1, look around for reliable rocks, okay? And what I mean by this is reliable, strong people that the Lord has put in your life to help you follow Him and to help you have examples of how to follow Him. God intentionally put us into families, for example, with 2, hopefully, people who have some experience following Jesus Christ. So look to them, rely on them. I hope that you have parents that provide an example of discipleship and faith and testimony that you can look to and striving that you can look to. But we don't all have that. And so as part of Christ's covenant community, as members of His church, we also have the opportunity to look to others that are put in our vicinity, such as youth leaders, seminary teachers, bishops, young women's presidents, Relief Society presidents, that really sweet lady in the ward, that really awesome priest in your ward. There's people all around us, reliable rocks that God has given us to help us maintain our faith when maybe we are doubting a little bit. Okay, and to give you an example of this, if you're like, well, I thought you were just supposed to lean on your own testimony, not on other people's, here's a quick example from Elder Holland that might help. Elder Holland gave a dynamic and awesome talk in April of 2013 called Lord, I Believe. And I'd encourage you to read the whole thing, but here's a little snippet. This was the very end. He said, if your faith is a little tested in this or any season, I invite you to lean on mine. This is Elder Holland saying, lean on my testimony if you need to. I know this work is God's very truth, and I know that only at our peril would we allow doubt or devils to sway us from its path. Hope on, journey on, honestly acknowledge your questions and concerns, but first and forever fan the flame of your faith, because all things are possible to them that believe. He endorses this idea that in certain seasons of our lives, we may need to lean on other people, and that's totally okay, and in fact, a good idea rather than trying to go it alone. We were not meant to go it alone in mortality. On a related note, if you're looking for further evidence, look to the parable of the 10 virgins. Okay, this is a bit of a caution, which is that the oil of preparation can't be shared, right? The 5 wise virgins had prepared and had their oil ready. The 5 foolish virgins did not, and they were not able to go into the bridegroom, and they missed that wedding. So don't rely so heavily on others that you say, well, Elder Holland knows, so I don't need to find out for myself. That would be foolhardy. We need to do the spiritual work necessary, and that's I'm paraphrasing President Nelson, to get our own testimonies and to receive personal revelation on these important matters. So while we lean on others, we should be proactively seeking our own witness and doing the spiritual work necessary to get that. Watching someone exercise does not help me to become more fit. So too, watching someone else gain a testimony is not going to gain a testimony for me. Mom and Dad can't get my testimony for me. Mom and Dad can't make the covenants for me. Elder Holland can't do the spiritual work for me. They can help and encourage, but I have to do the work. So look around to others, but also be willing to do the spiritual work yourself. All right, number 2, look back on past experiences and testimony. And I'll look to an example in the scriptures of Nephi here. In 2 Nephi chapter 4, there's something often called Nephi's Psalm. And what is meant by that is it's kind of a poetic way that he works through some feelings and some concerns that he has. And in the first part of the chapter, he really kind of gets down on himself, really. He talks about how, like, his own weaknesses and his own failings, and how he says, "Oh, wretched man that I am," in verse 17, "my heart sorroweth because of my flesh, my soul grieveth because of mine iniquities." And this is Nephi the prophet. And yet he feels like, I'm so susceptible to sin and temptation, and I make so many mistakes. And he's really kind of getting down on himself. And yet, he does something really interesting starting in verse 19 through, I believe it's verse 26, that I think we can learn from. He says, in spite of all of my sins and my weakness and my frailty and the hard things that I've experienced, I know in whom I have trusted. Verse 19, my God hath been my support. He hath led me through mine afflictions. He's preserved me upon the great waters. He's filled me with his love. He's confounded my enemies. He's heard my cry by day, and he hath given me knowledge and visions in the night. Okay, he says, here's things I've done. I've waxed bold in mighty prayer, and angels came and ministered to me. I have received revelations, right, in verse 25. And then he goes on to talk about, like, if the Lord in his condescension unto the children of men hath visited men in so much mercy, why should my heart weep? And then the rest of the verse, he's just rejoicing in the goodness of God. And so I think a principle that we can learn from this is that as we look back on past experiences and testimony, especially our own past experiences and testimony, it can help fortify our faith going forward. It can help strengthen us to press on and endure to the end in faithfulness during those hard and difficult times in our faith. And I'll just give you an example of this that has been powerful for me. Okay, this is my missionary journal, well, one of my missionary journals from my time during my mission. And I wrote some things in here in my own handwriting that were special and sacred and powerful to me. And if I'm feeling down or I'm maybe doubting or having some concerns about, like, am I really doing the right thing? Is this all true? Is this all real? I can look back and be strengthened by my own testimony. Now, it's one thing to hear someone else say that they know something is true, but I would argue it's even more powerful to hear your own self in your own words testify of truth. If you're not keeping a journal, can I invite you to do that? Can I invite you to, in some form or fashion, in any way that you want, find a way to write down and recognize the Lord's hand in your life, the things that he's doing for you, the knowledge and revelation and testimony that he is sending to you. Because in the future, you are going to need it. You are going to need to remember what you once knew. And I can think of very few witnesses more powerful than your own when times of difficulty and times of struggle. Now, last one, okay, last suggestion. When you're struggling to sustain your faith or you're feeling spiritually lost, can I encourage you to look heavenward to the rock of your Redeemer? We talked about looking around to metaphorical spiritual rocks in our lives, but the rock that we need to lean upon, we need to build upon, is Jesus Christ. Helaman 5:12 teaches us that we should build upon the rock of our Redeemer, which is Christ. That when the devil sends forth his mighty winds and his shafts in the whirlwind and all these things he's trying to do to knock us off of the holy place or standing in a holy place with Christ, when the devil sends those things forth, which he will, it's not an if he sends them forth, they shall have no power to drag us down to the gulf of misery and endless woe because of the rock upon which we are built. When you build your life upon Jesus Christ, when you build your foundation, your testimony, your everything upon him and his gospel, you need not worry. You need not fear. He's not going anywhere. He will not fail. That doesn't mean we won't make mistakes. It doesn't mean we won't have questions. But we need not be concerned that we're going to totally have the rug pulled out from under us and that it will all come crashing down. And I'll give you one example that might be helpful in this circumstance of the importance of building, most importantly, first and foremost, upon the rock of our Redeemer, which is Christ. I once knew a young man who was part of an active family, members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, did all the things that you would anticipate that a faithful Latter-day Saint would do. And this young man went on his mission. Over the course of his mission, his father was the bishop. And somewhere along the line, several members of the family started to leave the church. They started to get associated with anti-material and became very disillusioned with the things that they had professed to believe prior. Shortly after this man finished his tenure, his time serving as the bishop of his ward, he left the church altogether. And several of his children followed suit. And this was just devastating, right? Because I can only imagine that this young man looked up to his father and looked up to him as his bishop even. and might have thought, I'm going to found my testimony on him because he seems so solid. What if the young man had built his testimony on dad and dad alone? When dad leaves the church, there goes the son's testimony, the young man's testimony. That's what happened for some of his siblings. But, and this is the good part of the story, I guess, this young man was built upon the rock of our Redeemer, which is Christ. And when his father left the church, it hurt him, and that was really hard. But he didn't lose his testimony over it. He continued to stand strong. He continued with the attitude of, I don't care if everybody abandons the Lord and his church. I'm sticking with him to the end. And I found that so inspiring and a good reminder to build upon the right foundation. And I know that that foundation is Jesus Christ and his church. Let us build on him and the things that he has invited us to join in and to be a part of. I hope that's helpful, and I say that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you for listening to the Ask in Faith podcast. If this has been helpful for you, please like, share, subscribe, leave a review. It really does help. We want to get this message to as many of God's children as possible and appreciate your support. Have a great week.